Hello everyone. Today I welcome you to the 11th video of our YouTube channel, and this video is dedicated for the topic the 12 links of interdependent origination. And this topic can also be related to the cause and effect principle, and it's a fundamental teaching we find in all the Buddhist schools. You could be coming from any of these Buddhist schools, but still you will find the fundamental teaching in this 12 fundamental teaching of Buddhism in these 12 links of interdependent origination. And we can explain many different things in this world, many different universal and natural phenomena using the interdependent origination in many different ways. So it is a useful tool to examine and also to dissect different working principles in our day-to-day life. But in Buddhism, the main emphasis for the 12 links of interdependent origination is given to the operation of our human consciousness. So let me ask a question from you. What is samsara? What is the meaning of samsara to you? Most of the time, most Buddhist practitioners would answer that samsara is essentially the never-ending reincarnation, or the never-ending cycle of reincarnations, or between the never-ending cycle between the life and death throughout many lifetimes. So that's the typical definition you can hear from many Buddhist practitioners. But is it the real meaning of samsara? Well, to understand that, I think it is better to spend more time on studying on this topic, the interdependent origination. So that is what we are going to do in this video. So now when we come to this section of the video, we have a cycle that is comprised of 12 sections, or the 12 boxes. And this figure is not something new to the Buddhist teaching. In most of the Buddhist schools and in most of the Buddhist teachings, we learn about this cycle. And this cycle, as you can see, has 12 separate boxes, and all these boxes define certain aspects, important aspects and integral parts of the working principle of our human consciousness. But then these 12 links of the interdependent origination can be explained in many different ways. Some people use this cycle to understand, also to emphasize the never-ending cycle of life and death, and many lifetimes throughout the samsara of a person. And another way to explain the working principle of the cycle is to see samsara as the mind activities. Now, if you usually ask about this cycle from a Theravada perspective, a person coming from Theravada background, he would certainly ascribe it to the first one, the never-ending cycle among many lifetimes. So it's more akin to the physical birth and death. But then if you ask and show this cycle to, let's say, someone coming from Buddhist tantric background, or rather Mahayana background, so they would have a different opinion, and they would answer you saying that, okay, this is essentially about the operation of our mind, human mind. So that is the never-ending thought process of our human consciousness. So that's how most of the time the tantrics and most of the Mahayana bodhisattvas would look into the 12 links of interdependent origination. But regardless of the viewpoint, in any case, we have to first come to the Buddhist practice. We need to do meditation and we need to attain meditative concentration, samadhis, and then we need to examine the operation of our mind in micro level, so that we would have a better understanding how the human consciousness works first, and therefore this information would help us to be free from suffering. So that is the primary goal in Buddhism. And on top of that, it will also lead to ending of the physical life and death, physical reincarnation in human existence. So let's try to understand all these boxes one by one. So this is a cycle. So what is the inherent nature of the cycle? Well, we can start from any point, and it can run through infinite cycles. But then where should we start? Well, you can start from any point, and then it will continue until it will finish to the state before the start. Well, usually when we try to explain the 12 links of interdependent origination, we start explaining the cycle at the point of ignorance. So what does ignorance really mean? Many people have many different ideas about ignorance. Some people say that ignorance is essentially the misunderstanding or the lack of wisdom we have about the existence of this world. And some people say the ignorance is staying in darkness without engaging in any kind of spiritual activities. And some people say the ignorance is the darkness of our mind. So there are many interpretations. Well, but in my opinion, when it comes to the Buddhist understanding, the ignorance is essentially means that the unawareness of our physical birth, unawareness of the value of our human birth, and then not practicing spirituality to attain enlightenment. So this can be considered as the ignorance. But then when you look into this specific cycle, after the ignorance, the second box is essentially the mental formation or the formation of your mind. So when it comes to this specific cycle, the best explanation we can give is the ignorance is the contamination of your mind. So your mind is getting contaminated by external events, external substances, and five senses. So this can be considered as the ignorance when it comes to this specific cycle. And why do you have this contamination? Why do you have this darkness in your mind? It's mainly because of the mental formations. So what does mental formation means? Now our human mind actually works with the help of five senses and also with the help of the contact. So our human mind makes contact with the five senses and all the signals we aggregate through the five senses all the time. And that creates these mental formations within our consciousness. And if you look into the third box, that is the consciousness, the human mind or the human consciousness. And it can only run through the formation of the mental factors or the samskaras. So because of the ignorance, we have the mental formations or the sanskaras. And because of the never-ending sanskaras, because of the never-ending clinging or contamination to five senses and all the signals and signs, we create our human consciousness. Our human consciousness usually does not stop and become idle. It always is active. Only an experienced meditator, after doing meditation for a long time and after attaining these different kind of samadhis for several number of years, usually have a very stable and very a calm, abiding consciousness to them. And then because of the consciousness, because of the aggregate of the mental formations, we create the names and forms. So what are the names and forms? And I think most meditators would agree with me about the usual signs and symbols that we encounter and experience during our meditation. So when we are in the close eye meditation, due to our chakra activation, through some higher dimensions and energy planes, you will naturally come to witness certain meditative signs and symbols. So they usually appear as names and forms. You could be coming from different background. Let's say even if you are coming, let's say from an Abrahamic faith, you would still see this, let's say a figure of a divine being, an angel, or even godly figure, as a name and form. And these names and forms are continuously generating in our human consciousness, and without that the human consciousness cannot run, the mind process cannot run. So from the names and forms, then we come to the six faculties or the salayat. So the contact or the contamination to the name and the identification of the names and forms usually happen through the six faculties. So the emerging of the six faculties can only happen through the identification of name and forms. And the next question is, the names and forms cannot be identified to us without the contact. So this is in this stage we are explaining and we try to understand the sensorial and the mental contact. And only through this contact we can identify the existence or the emerging of names and forms in us. It can be witnessed or experienced during meditation. It can be also experienced outside meditation. So even if you're, let's say, walking by the road, you would identify yourself or your consciousness with certain external objects. It can be a religious identification. It can be a mundane identification. So usually the identification happens due to this sensorial and mental contact. And this is followed by the feeling. So the feeling gives us, it's the cause for suffering. So when you see your arch enemy, of course, you would not be happy to see that person. And let's say you are seeing your ex-wife, and all the feelings related to your the interaction with that person, and all the memories related to the interaction with that person in the past, they come into your surface and they will flood into your human consciousness. So that's how the feelings are coming to you. Then the next question is, how do we how do we get the sense of these feelings? Usually the feelings are felt into our heart, the heart center. You can be angry and then it will be felt into your heart. And you can be sad, it will be felt into your heart. So the heart center is the object or the body part that is becoming sensitive to your feelings. And then from these feelings we come to the desire, or in Pali language we usually call it tanha. So the desire is not essentially the desire to own something. Well, its desire is basically trying to own something and having let's say clinging to something. But then this desire can can lead you to suffering as well as happiness. So then it has both good and bad. However, from the feeling arises the desire. And then from the desire, the clinging comes, so that clinging can also happen in, both in good and bad ways. So they have this dualistic notion to it. And due to the clinging, the becoming or the existence of the mind comes into play. And from the existence of the mind, well, the birth, aging, and death of your mind, of the human consciousness, come into play, come into this cycle. And then this one cycle, the starting cycle, ends at this point, and this cycle will continue forever, as long as these two boxes, or these 12 boxes, or these 12 links are connected to each other, and as long as you have the ignorance running in. And that is the very basic explanation we can give to the 12 links of interdependent origination. But there are a few important points that I want to highlight. So the birth in this cycle, usually people refer to this as the birth of the physical body of the person. But if you look into, if you dive deeper into this cycle and try to understand the big picture, this is essentially about the operation of your mind, the operation of your human consciousness. So the birth in this case is the birth, or the operation, or the starting operation of your thought process, in my opinion. Aging and death in this case is the suffering that you experience through the never-ending thought loops or the thought process. Now these 12 links of interdependent origination in this way explains about ever-running thought process of a person. And there's another way to look at this cycle. So the first box is about the ignorance, and it is succeeded by the mental formation. So the ignorance and mental formations belong to the past. Because of these past memories, because of this past information, or the mental constructs, we give rise to our thought process. So that is the time, notion of time that belongs to past. And then we have the other 7 boxes, starting from the consciousness, followed by name and forms, 6 faculties, sensorial and mental contact, feeling, desire, and clinging, and becoming. And these 8 box, the 9 boxes belong to the present moment. And during this present moment, these 9 factors come into our thought process, and this is actually happening in a blink of an eye, and that gives the rise, or that gives the fuel to run your thought process. So from the ignorance and mental formations, or the sanskaras, we have the prerequisite to run the thought process, which belongs to the past. And then the other 9 boxes, they represent the present moment. So that gives the fuel to the thought process. And then from this thought process, the emerging of the individuality, or the emerging of the ego happens. And that happens in the order of birth, and then aging and death. So that is how we explain the 12 links of interdependent origination with respect to the operation of our mind, or the human consciousness. But remember, the ability to clearly see these 12 links in this cycle is only achievable for a Samyak Sambuddha, or a fully enlightened Buddha. Nor an ordinary person, or even an arihant or a saint in Buddhist tradition can clearly see or can dissect into these 12 links in the thought process. It can be only observed, it can be only understood by a fully enlightened Samyak Sambuddha. Well, now, so that's about the 12 links of the interdependent origination. So when someone is fully enlightened, what would happen to the human consciousness of that person? So let's try to understand it with respect to these 12 links. Well, I am not a fully enlightened person, but then I can like deliver or share my teaching, from the things I learned from many of enlightened masters I have met in my life. So I used to practice meditation with a divinely incarnated master from an authentic spiritual lineage in Sri Lanka. And then I also used to receive teachings from other divinely incarnated masters around the world. So according to them, when someone comes to the full enlightenment, transcending their human consciousness and transcending their physical body, they will come to a point that they will be free from the contamination or the operation of the mind. So this is where the person experiences the true emptiness of the mind, the true empty nature of the mind. And in that state, usually there will be zero mental activities, and that is said to be the subtlest state of our mind. And if you refer to the Tibetan Buddhism, this state of mind is usually referred to as the ultimate clear light of the mind, or the Dharmakaya state. And according to most of the the references and the explanations and treatises from most of these masters, one can only go into the subtlest state of the mind, or the purest or the Dharmakaya state, only by renouncing the worldly ties. So that is the nature of the mind at the full enlightenment, according to what I heard from these enlightened masters. And then I also want to highlight that this clear light of the mind can appear in many different ways. This clear light of the mind can appear in at many different layers of your mind. So for an example, if you are a new meditator, if you are new to the meditation, the clear light Samadhi can appear as a fruition mind only to the conscious layer. And if you are a seasoned meditator, you can even bring this clear light or the fruition mind state to the conscious and subconscious layers. But only at the final enlightenment, one can come to the final, the clear light, transcending all the three layers of our mind. So I'm using these three layers of mind from the Carl Jung's teaching. And if and only if one can transcend all these three layers, one's ego self is completely transcendent. So that is said to be the clear, the purest form of our mind. And only at this purest form, one can be free from the thought process, and one can be really free from the samsara. So then the next question comes, if that is the case, then the samsara is essentially, what is the definition of samsara? The definition of samsara is essentially being free from all these, the clinging, mental clinging, and the 12 links of the interdependent origination. So then one might argue that then we don't need to actually renounce anything. Well, according to the universal process, if someone wants to come to the purest state of their mind, attaining or reaching to the Dharmakaya level, then one has to renounce their family ties. But then the attire is actually not important. So this is what we need to understand. Well, now let's take a look at how our human consciousness actually works. So here in this figure, we have several boxes that represent a kind of a flow chart. So at the beginning of the flow chart, we have certain, the signs or let's say some symbols that help to govern or run our human consciousness. For an example, in this case, in this context, a sign could be your arch enemy, someone who you really don't like. And as soon as your mind or the mental, your consciousness has the contact with this external sign, then the defilements or the fetters in your mind will come into the surface, and then these fetters will be in contact with the sign that you catch or have the contact through your five senses. Due to this contamination, due to this contact, the human consciousness starts to rise, so that you will have, let's say, a couple of thoughts. You will quickly identify your arch enemy, and then you will try to label him. And then as soon as you identify the person, a set of thoughts will be followed, and then this set of thoughts will explain about your history, your interaction with this person, and then this thought process, the number of thoughts will escalate, and this will go on and on, like maintaining the continuous human consciousness through several thought chains or thought loops. So this is how the human consciousness actually works. So we have external signs, we have external symbols, and then we have the mental fetters and defilements, and then we create this mental contact with these signs and symbols through five senses, and then this will create the thought process, thoughts one after another. But the next interesting thing is, where do where does the I or the individuality emerge? So again, if you bring your focus into these 12 links of interdependent origination, we have these last three boxes in the circle that represent the emerging of your individuality. These three boxes represent the ego self. Well, now, as I mentioned, this cycle happens in a blink of an eye. So you don't have any dissecting ability to go into the micro level and carefully examine the emerging of all 12 boxes. But just for the sake of analysis, we say that these last three boxes define the emerging of I-ness or the ego self. And before that, the notion of the ego doesn't exist. Well, now that is a basic explanation to the 12 links of interdependent origination. But then basically we spend time in the first half of the video to explain about the operation of the human consciousness. That's what most of the time you find in Buddhist teachings, how the 12 links of interdependent origination is giving emphasis to the operation of human mind. But then how is this related to the cause and effect principle? Well, let's say that, again, I need to stress you that I'm giving these teachings, I'm sharing this knowledge based on the information that I gathered from fully enlightened masters who were influential in my spiritual evolution, so that this information can be really useful for other people. So let's say now you are an ignorant person, and then you don't have any meditative experience at all, so that your mind always dwells in the ignorance, and then your mind is actually dark. So that essentially means that your mind is fully contaminated with all the defilements and mental fetters, so that whatever the sign and symbol that you get from five senses is always, being contaminated with these defilements. So that mind always identifies with the five aggregates, so that it creates your human consciousness and running thought loops. But then how would it work for a fully enlightened person? So that's an interesting thing to understand. So as I mentioned, when one becomes fully enlightened, transcending all the three layers of human mind, human consciousness, and also transcending the physical body. So usually that kind of master in Buddhist tradition, we refer to them as divinely incarnated masters. So we say that their mind is totally empty. And that is the purest or the subtlest state of the human mind. And that is said to have zero contact or zero contamination to external signals and external the objects. So when such a person, when such enlightened mind comes into contact with an external object, that enlightened person has the ability to identify the object with the help of the memory and the past information, but it does not have any inclination or clinging to the object that is identified. So if you recall the 12 links of interdependent origination, if you are free from ignorance and the mental formation or the sanskaras, then your five senses only work without any clinging to the object, without any clinging to the object of identification. So that is the benefit of having an enlightened consciousness. So you only get the signal, but because of no clinging, because of zero clinging, you cannot proceed to the feelings. You cannot proceed to the 12 link of interdependent origination cycle will not continue to the lateral stages. So that the operation of human consciousness only stops at the identification of the object and responses to the event. No reactions, just a response. And the response is also free from mental fetters for a fully enlightened master. So that instead of having reactive qualities, it will only become a response, a neutral response from the person. And this type of human consciousness also has this the nature of flushing, so that whatever the object that you have the contact with, whatever the object that you try to grasp from the five senses, immediately the enlightened consciousness, the enlightened human mind will flush whatever the things that was grasped, whatever the information that were aggregated or caught by the five senses. So that's the benefit of having an enlightened consciousness. So it is like always getting refreshed. And usually, for a person who has this completely purified, completely transcended human consciousness, they can even go into that refreshing state during the sleep. So that this person, before going to the bed, he has a normal type of consciousness, but with very less activities in human mind and very lower level of contamination. But then during the sleep, when they go to the sleep, the mind will get zero or totally refreshed with the universal source or the dharmakaya state. So that when that person wakes up in the morning, he will wake up as a new person. I mean, in spirituality, in new age spirituality, and also in, I think, in traditional religious belief system, we say that if you are an enlightened person, you will die today before the sleep and you will wake up as a new person. So that is what is essentially meant by this example. I think this example says it all. So can you imagine the benefit of having that kind of human mind or consciousness? Every day during the sleep, you will get refreshed and a new person will emerge, rise when they wake up from the sleep. So this is what most of the ancients actually were trying to explain to us from both East and West, sharing their wisdom. And I think we still need to make effort to understand what they really meant. So coming back to the point, as I mentioned earlier, this 12 links of interdependent origination, we express or present these 12 links just for the sake of simplicity and just for the sake of analysis. Only for a fully enlightened master can actually look into these 12 links separately in a blink of an eye. And if someone wants to come into that level, of course, it's a long-term practice. It's a fruition or a result of a long-term engagement of the meditation practice. And I think one day we all will be able to reach up to that refreshing state of our mind. So with that explanation, we conclude this video. I hope that it will be beneficial for all the sentient beings. Thank you.